Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Hello again, how are you? I'm Martin Ballard and thanks for joining me for episode 27 of this podcast series from Imagine Theatre, one of the UK's biggest producers of pantomime and children's theatre.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
Now, before we begin, a quick reminder that if you've missed any of the previous episodes with creatives, actors and behind-the-scenes tours of Imagine Theatre, you can catch up with each and every one of them because they are all still available. And don't forget to subscribe to the series so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. In episode 26, we caught up with the company's artistic director, writer, and probably the only actor to play Dame in two different pantomimes in two different countries in one season last Christmas, Eric Potts. Well, this time we're going to mark a very special anniversary as it's 13 years since Steve and Sarah Bowden acquired the company, then known as Telltale, which then became Wish, and now, of course, the company we know and love as Imagine Theatre. So for episode 27, Managing Director Steve Bowden and his wife Sarah, the company's business and marketing director, are with me to talk about the history of the company as well as its bright future. Steve and Sarah, how are you?
Hi, Martin. Good to see you.
Tell us a bit about the early days, Steve, because, I mean, you were obviously involved, as we've heard before, with the company before you acquired it, before you took ownership.
That's right. I joined with Ian and Will when it was Telltale Theatre Productions in the late 1990s. And I'd spent a lot of time with Ian and Will watching the Belgrade pantos and catching up with them. And I'd always loved pantomime. I'd written and created my own. And Ian and Will were looking for a company manager to take the Fun Song Factory live show out on the road. Fun Song Factory was on TV, on GMTV, with Justin Fletcher and Katie Stevens. And Ian and Will booked a live tour to take that show around theatres in the country. And they were looking for a company stage manager. And Ian said, would I like to do it? And I did. And from that point, even when the tour had finished, Ian was convinced there was a future for pantomime production and taking those shows that they were creating at the Belgrade out on the road. And it was a case of just piecing that jigsaw together.
And at this time, Sarah, not only were you not involved in the company, but you weren't a Bowden.
That's right. I wasn't at all. I was off doing other things. I saw all the Belgrade pantos in the 90s and loved them and had a great affection for them. Never quite dreamt that would turn out to be my career. So yes, I was in a very different place to Steve at that point in my life. So I was very much an observer of productions rather than a participant in the preparation of them, building my own career in a completely different industry, but loving theatre, absolutely loving what was being done at the Belgrade, loving the work that was being done, always having a hope that I would be involved in some way, but never dreaming that it would turn out to be as it has.
Tell us the story again of how you two met.
So Steve and I met at a fabulous little theatre in Kenilworth called The Priory. Mm-hmm. The Priory in Kenilworth is everything you need in a theatre, but in miniature, 120 seats, 9 bars in the fly tower, everything that a theatre needs, but just really, really small. I first met Steve at auditions for a production of Anything Goes. Steve was the production team. I was in the show. But we both had our own lives at that point. And so that was in May 1999 that we first encountered each other. It wasn't until...
I like the way you say encounter.
Encountered, yeah. But it's really weird. We both can remember that meeting very clearly. We both can remember exactly what happened on that first day that we met. Yeah, it's just strange. We just both knew, didn't we, at the time? It was really weird. But we didn't really start to get to know each other properly until we both were on a production of Nonsense. So that was cast in January 2001. Steve was the director and I played Sister Mary Amnesia, which was the nun who'd had her crucifix dropped on her head. And it was during that time that we kind of got to know each other and we started to see each other properly in July 2021 and we got married in August 2001 and we got married in August 2002.
Is that an accurate timeline?
She's spot on. You see, that's the great thing about Sarah, and that's why I think we get on so well, because Sarah remembers the detail and I just remember the scale. But yeah, I think it's unusual for a husband and wife team to be able to work together. We talk to so many people who say, gosh, how is it working together and living together and being a couple? And the honest answer is it's absolutely brilliant because we have such complementary but contrasting skill sets, and we understand the needs of each other in the business, and we're able to bring those together, in a hopeful, successful way.
Okay, well, the backdrop to all of this was that Ian and Will were doing their own thing in several areas, and then one of those things just happened to be tweenies, which really took off. I don't think anybody could have really predicted just how massive it would be, but that made them rethink what they were going to do with Telltale or Wish as it became.
Yes, absolutely. Once you get a project like Tweenies that is all-consuming and an unbelievable global success, which it was, it meant that a lot of their time was pulled towards the TV arm of the company. And of course, they'd both trained as actors. They both had a very strong theatre background. They both loved theatre, but they were very, very successful television producers for children. And that did take a lot of their time. So at that point, my involvement with the theatre production company and Sarah's involvement became stronger because we were the driving force behind getting the sets, which, as you remember, this was how the company started. We were taking scenery and costumes out of the Belgrade and repurposing them for productions around the country. And from that, we were asked to produce pantos in theatres because they loved the freshness and the take that Ian and Will were doing at Coventry, and that was the ethos of what we did, family panto. So my kind of route through the panto world with Sarah was very much growing the company while they were engaged in Telltale.
So this was already starting to have a bigger impact on your lives together, wasn't it, before you even acquired the company?
Yeah, for me, I cut my teeth watching what Steve did. The first Christmas together, Christmas 2001, there was a barn full of scenery in Banbury, and Steve used to drive down to Banbury every day and move scenery around. And for me, that was my first understanding of really how it all worked and how it all pulled together. And I began to learn from him whilst working in my own career, which was very much business and marketing focused. At the time, I was working at Marconi on their graduate training programme, doing my placements. My placements turned out to be hugely valuable. But my life was spent learning about business and marketing, which is the element that I bring to the business. I don't profess to be creative. I don't profess to have a knowledge of theatrical production as staging. But what I do understand is what it takes to keep a business going, and the backbone of that business, which, as Steve says, is why we work so well together, because his skills are in production and in creation, and my skills are in administration and business. And the two of those skills together are what we hope brings the success to the business, and what we hope makes it the solid foundation that it has, which has helped it survive through the last 2 years and what's gone on. Those bones of the backbone of it were put in place 20 years ago, and what it still relies on now. But it takes both of us and both of the understandings of what we do to be able to create a business like this.
13 years ago then, you took that massive leap of faith in acquiring the company. Do you remember what that felt like?
It was scary and it was exciting. We'd got to the stage where the company needed to expand to enable it to grow and continue. And Will and Ian were at very different stages of their careers. And Sarah and I said, well, look, why don't we just move this forward? We absolutely keep you on as consultants because they were invaluable in the early days to the kind of the ethos of what we were. And they absolutely agreed it was the right thing to do. So Sarah and I put together the deal and worked out how we could make it work, because at that stage we had a 2-year-old daughter and all the pressures that brought, and took the steps to line that all up. And it was a hugely successful acquisition. Ian and Will were incredibly supportive and continue to be so. And from that point, we were able to put proper infrastructure in. I mean, Sarah's absolutely touched on exactly what this is. This world that we operate in is show business. There's shows, but the business has to be as strong as the shows, otherwise it doesn't work. So we were unable to put a lot of foundations, a lot of structure into the management of the company and what the company needed from a staffing point of view. We also knew that we had to relocate to bigger premises to accommodate all the shows that we were amassing. So that was kind of the first project that we did, was to look for new premises, put a big infrastructure in place to support the rollout of productions, both on stage and in terms of hires. And that was the journey that we did.
I mean, it's very easy, isn't it, for a new company to run before it can walk. There's been steady growth all the way through the last 13 years or so, starting with that very first panto in Boston, and then Loughborough, and then more and more venues coming on board. That has to be managed, though, doesn't it?
It does. It really has to be managed, and that's my role. I always feel like we play good cop, bad cop sometimes, and I often feel like my job is mostly bad cop, because I'm the one that delivers the news of what budgets we can spend, what we can't spend, what our targets are, what we're aiming for. And like any business, I have to keep the tax man happy, the VAT man happy, I have to keep the health and safety man happy. that's what I have to do as the business part of the show business, as Steve said. It has to have a core background. It has to have a really solid foundation so that people can confidently come and join us. So, we've got 18 members of staff again now. We've ramped the team back up to full speed since the pandemic. Each and every one of those is reliant on us every month to pay their mortgage. Each and every cast member is reliant on us to know that we've done the right things behind the scenes, to know that we've got the right infrastructure in place, the right insurances, the right health and safety, everything that will protect them. We've done all the right inspections on all of the equipment that they're using. It has to be organised. People have to know that they can trust us to have done our job properly. And that's the bit that people don't see. People go and see the shows, but they don't see the backbone and the stability that it takes to have a business of this magnitude. It's difficult for us to comprehend sometimes just how big it's got, because we've seen it right since its first days, right since its inception. And when you're in the middle of it and you're dealing with it every day, you forget just what it's like and the scale of what it is. And particularly during the pandemic, sometimes we stood back and went, oh my goodness, I can't quite comprehend what we had and what we hope we will be able to keep. So yeah, it's all about organisation. It's all about the team that we have here. We are the leaders of a team, but ultimately it's them who deliver, and it's they who are absolutely the most important part of this business.
It's been a learning curve, the whole thing, and you're continuing to learn. I mean, legislation changes, all sorts of things have changed in the last decade or so, but you've learnt so much about the business side of it as well. A lot of people who are listening to this might think, well, if you want to do a panto for somebody, you probably phone them up and say, can we do your panto? And they say, yeah, all right, come in. The tendering process, all of the things that go into it that people don't think about.
People would never comprehend if they came in and they saw it. They would never comprehend just what we have to do here. We've had a few people who've come in and worked for us on short-term contracts who've gone away and said, I will never think about production in the same way again. I cannot get over the detail that you have to go into, the work you have to do, the contracts you have to fulfil and oblige, the legalities and the requirements there are that sit on us, the rules and regulations that we have to follow. It is incredibly difficult, but that's what we do. That's what we're here for. And yeah, it's a learning curve. Every day is a school day here. I can honestly say that every year we sit down at the end of the season and go, right, what do we need to improve to make this better? How do we continue to learn and how do we make it better? Because the minute we stop doing that is the minute that we can't do it anymore. We have to keep striving to improve and to make it better every year.
One of the biggest challenges when a company grows is being able to delegate, isn't it? And Steve, I know that right from the outset you directed more than one show in one season. Obviously you concentrate on Reading now. Your role's changed slightly as well, hasn't it?
It has. It's really changed. And people, when they come into the offices, or talk to us, and if they're not perhaps directly engaged with what we do, perhaps don't realise that it takes a good 18 months to get one show on stage. So we're constantly working 18 months ahead. We've got the current season and we're planning for the next. But what we realised very quickly once Sarah and I took it over was that I and she actually needed to be the strategic leaders. Mm-hmm. And I think I found that quite hard because I had amassed my knowledge and skill set in theatre through local theatre as I was growing up as a teenager, local Midland groups that I was a member of. And there was no opportunity when I was training to do producing. That wasn't a thing. You can now do modules at university in producing, and there are various operations around UK Theatre and Society of London Theatre have routes for new producers to cut their teeth and get support. And that really wasn't there. And I was indebted to Ian and Will at the Belgrade for allowing me to kind of learn my craft with them as mentors. So I suppose delegation to me was really hard. I loved design. My background was actually training as a teacher in design and technology. So I loved technology. I loved design. I loved what we were trying to represent on stage. I understood performing arts from a watcher, but also from doing it while I was at university, and trying to actually separate out the love of going out and putting a show on and working with actors, which is something that I still love, but realising that you're now responsible for multiple productions, the financing of those and the resources of those and the logistics of delivering those. It was a case of saying, okay, I just need to focus on one production artistically, but oversee and manage and coordinate a team of brilliant people and actually give them autonomy to work for us and deliver those shows and just and be there to guide them.
In many ways, going into the rehearsal room in Reading for the Hexagon Panto, Is it almost like a breath of fresh air? Because you can, I guess your phone is still ringing all the time, but for a short time you can actually just concentrate on the fun aspect.
It is great fun, and I always have a co-director who works with me on the Reading Panto for the very simple reason that when you're running a business like this, where all the income and the work is predominantly derived from 8 weeks over Christmas, I have to have a support network in place to allow me to step out of the rehearsal room. But I do enjoy it. I do enjoy collaboration. I think that's the backbone of a lot of what we do. It's very collaborative. It's not dictatorial, but I do enjoy coming into the rehearsal room, working with people like Justin and Paul Morse, and having that autonomy to create something new and fresh. That always stays with you, but you have to get to a point in your career where you go, I enjoy that, but actually I really enjoy the producing side and the bringing together of teams of people to do what we do.
On the business side again, Sarah, we've talked about in previous podcasts, the fact that you've changed the name a couple of times and you've moved to larger premises a couple of times. But what have been the key stages in the growth of Imagine?
Oh gosh, that's a big question, Martin. I remember the biggest thing that stays in my mind is the fact that when I said to Steve right at the beginning, what do you want to achieve out of all of this? And his words were, I'd like to produce Panto in a number one venue. And that was the kind of initial target of what would you like to do? We'd love to get a big production under our belts. It totally passed us by, as I think I might have mentioned before, that we'd done it. And it was only when we were sitting at sort of 11 or 12 Pantos that we suddenly realised that we'd not just achieved our target, but we'd far exceeded it. And then it's continuing to grow way beyond our dreams. I mean, Steve and I just take each day as it comes. As you say, there's been steady growth. To say there's been any one specific or a group of events has been very difficult, because we've always just taken it very steady. Slow and steady wins the race is how we've seen it. We've had lots of opportunities to take on lots of productions over the years, but we've turned them away because we felt that it was either too fast a growth or it wasn't the right growth for us, or we wanted to take the company in a slightly different direction. So sometimes the decisions not to take things on have been as important as the decisions to take things on. I think that's how I'd summarise it. We've always sat back and looked at what our team is good at, what they would be best at producing, what we would like to make a difference at. So I think that's really where I come from, is what I haven't done rather than what I have done. I think is more the key parts of the business. We could have been at 20 productions 7 or 8 years ago, but they weren't the right 20 productions for us.
And what about the highlights? Not necessarily on stage or with particular shows, but things that you look back on with real pride.
Our team are a real highlight, because each time you recruit somebody into head office, they bring a different skill set, and I think each and every one of them in our team is just not only just fantastic at their job, but a person that I love spending time with, and I really appreciate them all. So I think watching the achievements of the team, I'm really proud of. Watching the achievements of Steve, super proud of. Obviously there's certain milestones, like the first time you turn over £1 million, you turn over £2 million, you turn over £3 million. Those are quiet goals that and we're just on the cusp of turning over 4 million now, and then the target obviously is 5 and beyond. So you could argue there's financial goals, you could argue there's personal goals. Particularly proud of the digital production and watching that on that opening night in Croydon, because that had been a dream of Steve's for several years, to take Panto into a different direction. So lots of different things that I'm really proud of, but mostly proud of what Steve has achieved and what the team here have achieved.
What about you, Steve? Highlights for you?
I think the highlight is actually getting to that point where you wake up in the morning and you go, okay, we run this company, we have an opportunity to do what it is that we want to do. And as Sarah says, the team is 100% what makes the company successful. Personal highlights for me are when we get to work in partnership with new theatres. I love it when we get a partnership and we get an agreement in place to produce with a new group of people, and to listen to their needs and what it is that they need, and to put a solution in place. Milestones, we've done almost 20 years in Kilmarnock. That I think is a huge milestone, and similarly at the Belgrade. The digital production and creating and evolving that new generation of pantomime, for me, is a really exciting opportunity, and I loved the journey that we went on to get that new vision of pantomime staging in Croydon and subsequently up at the Grand in Wolverhampton. The opportunity now, because we are of a scale that allows us to have conversations with people at the top of their game and potentially drive pantomime for the whole nation forward, in a new and exciting way, and making sure it stays alive. I'm really proud to have had conversations with the National Pantomime Association about the importance of pantomime and actually getting it recognised. And they've done a great job in making sure that pantomime is recognised and that it does have a kind of like a legacy to pass on to the next generation. And to be able to support that and be a part of that, I think, is really important. And that's the sort of achievements that I enjoy.
Some of the venues have got bigger and bigger, but you still have some medium-sized venues. The product is always different depending on where you're putting it. I don't know how many performances you've had, how many individual shows you've had, how many people you've worked with in cast, backstage and so on. It must be thousands and thousands after all this time.
It is. Thousands of performers and thousands of people that we've worked with. One of our goals from the outset was not to just grow the company and therefore only take on bigger pantos in bigger venues. For me, it's about making a difference. I spend a lot of time looking at the venues that we work in and say, okay, how can we make a difference? They might only be a 300-seat venue. But to me, making sure that venue gets the best that we can sustain in a venue of that size, push the boundaries and then try and encourage the audience who come to that to have a great family shared experience at Christmas. So for me, the ethos of the company is to work with venues of all sizes and to use the skills and the knowledge and the advantages that larger organisations have to help prop up smaller organisations that perhaps don't have the resource in terms of marketing or technical or creative in their organisation to be able to support that in a way that perhaps ordinarily they wouldn't get. As Sarah says, every day's a school day. What you learn in one venue, you can pass on to another. That shared learning, that shared knowledge, being able to build resources and skill sets in venues is really rewarding, not just the production itself.
As you know, Sarah, any company, when it starts out, has to have a business plan. It must have a business plan. It's foolish to start anything without a business plan. But what some people might think is once you've started a business, that's it. You've still got to have a plan. You must have a plan in terms of growth and the future. What sort of targets do you have now?
Well, that would be giving away the secrets, Martin, wouldn't it? No, you're absolutely right. Every year I sit down with Steve and we write our 5-year plan and beyond. So right now we are just completing the plan for right up to 2027, where we think we might like to go. Nobody but us will ever see that plan, but it's written down and it's a full document because it allows us to consolidate our thoughts. It allows us to look at where our targets are and what we would like to achieve. And some of those targets will surprise people. Some of it isn't growth, some of it is change. It just depends. There's lots of different aspects to it. Those plans were particularly useful during COVID times when we actually turned back to our business plan multiple times and said, right, where we've just got to delay it by a year, delay it by 2 years. Where are we trying to get to? What are our targets? Where are we still focusing on? But yeah, there's a full business plan. It'll only ever be seen by 2 sets of eyes. But there's always a plan of where it's going to go.
A cunning plan.
Oh yeah, said Baldrick.
In terms of panto on the stages of Imagine venues, that will have to evolve as well. We've talked about this in the past. The perception of panto is changing, but it has always evolved. This is nothing new, but in terms of panto for the future, do you have any targets yourself in what you want to see on a stage from an Imagine show?
I think we're always looking at evolving technologies. There's a lot of scope for bringing and connecting with audiences beyond just the auditorium itself. And it's looking beyond the constraints of a proscenium theatre, because I think everybody is aware that the landscape of town and city centres is changing and that theatres are part of that. But with the pandemic and with people perhaps moving and working from home a little more than they used to, and offices reconfiguring the resources that they need, the role of town centres and city centres is changing. And I think performing arts is such an important part of people's well-being. It's about allowing them to connect with it, but not necessarily having to pay a high price or sit in an auditorium watching something through a proscenium arch. I think there are ways that theatre can reach people and they can benefit from it beyond a theatre. So for me, it's about exploring that. It's about exploring the technology that we can put on stage. Clearly, bringing screens into panto and pushing that forward is something that we would like to develop, and the way that we can bring other technology into that. I'm a great fan of illusions and magic. I love circus. It's doing what panto has always done. These art forms have always been included in panto, but it's about how we can represent, redeliver, re-challenge the audience. The audience's expectations are very different now from how they were 5 years ago, and it's making sure that those expectations are satisfied. And, people always say it's a lot of children's first introduction to theatre. Yes, that's very true. But we also have to remember that those children are looking at it from a completely different viewpoint to generations that have gone by. Their expectations are very much geared around easy access, very clear messages. That the way that they view society and view the world is very different from how it was 10 years ago. And we have to make sure that we create these stories and that we tell these stories in a way that they will embrace, understand, that is true, that is diverse, that is accessible, and that really allows them to take what we do, because they're going to be the next generation that roll it forward.
And the stock of stories that we know and love continue to evolve. The stories are never quite the same. The characters are never quite the same because it evolves. But I'm wondering whether or not maybe in the next 5 to 10 years we might see some new stories, some new tales on a pantomime stage.
I would like that, and I know a lot of our colleagues in panto production feel very much the same, that it is always great to be able to bring new titles out, and also to perhaps find titles that were told and have not been told for years, Humpty Dumpty and stories like that, plus new tales, and making sure that the celebration, the things that people like about panto, which is obviously the spectacle of it, the comedy, the music, are told in an accessible way. And I think more than ever that we make sure that we tell stories that people feel they can relate to.
Panto's always been inclusive. It has to continue to be all-inclusive, something for everybody, of all ages, of all ethnicities, of all backgrounds, and that's what it's doing. Now, I'm interested in you two at home, because obviously every day you speak to people who live and breathe panto. Your daughter is already has been appearing in panto for I don't know how many years. Do you talk about anything else at home? Have you got bits of set in your back bedroom?
Do we talk about much more? There tends to be quite a lot of conversation around theatre, to be fair, because Holly, our daughter, she's done 6 Belgrade pantos. She's off to stage school in September. She eats, sleeps, lives, breathes it. It's just what she loves. She loves performing. So there's naturally going to be a lot of conversation around at home. The pandemic's been all-consuming for the last 2 years, so it has literally taken over our lives. We didn't get time off during the pandemic. We did sadly have to furlough all of our team, and we sadly had to go through a programme of heartbreaking redundancy that we never dreamt we would have to do. But the team is now back to full speed. Some of them came back to us after being made redundant, which is just wonderful. So the last 2 years have been predominantly conversations about panto at home, but we are slowly getting ourselves back, slowly beginning to find what it's like to be us again. It's been a couple of years of it has been conversation about panto, to be fair. Things are changing, aren't they?
I've got this idea of the two of you sitting at home and Steve going, do you know, I'd really like to move that sofa around that way, maybe change the sofa, get a new one, and then Sarah going, we really don't have the budget for that, you know.
That's exactly how it is. I mean, one of the great things, and things like the golf course, which is a big part of Sarah's life, are reopening, and that hopefully now the immediate chaos of 2 years have calmed down, Sarah can get back out on the golf course. When you love something, when you're your own boss, when you run your own company, of course, that goes with the territory, and we both know that. And we often, we'll go out on a walk and we'll reflect and we'll say, okay, this is really hard work. And anybody who runs a company knows it is really hard work. You are responsible, as Sarah said earlier, for every decision and everything that goes, and not only the management of the company, but the personnel issues that go with that. But when you say, what else could we do that would give us the satisfaction, there kind of isn't anything else. No. So I think you just accept that when you run your own company and when you work together, and when you're married and you're a partnership at work, you will talk about it until the day that you retire. Whenever that is, if ever. Plus,
you don't have time to do anything else, to be fair. And is the handicap going to come down again now? Has your golf really suffered?
Oh, it's been terrible. Do you know what's really interesting? In 2020, because of the nature of what was happening, and because the only place we could go was the golf course, Steve used to come and walk a lot with me after work, and because we couldn't go anywhere else, a handicap came tumbling down during 2020, and back to single figure playing, and great, back to where I want to be. And I looked at my car tells me where I travel, and 1 week alone in 2020 I went to the golf course 4 times. And, I was back to being a teenager again. In 2021, I managed 3 lots of 9 holes because 2021 for us was so much more challenging. 2020 was hard, don't get me wrong. We didn't think it could get harder, but 2021 was brutal. I finally had my first 9 holes back last week, but from the beginning of November 2020 until last week, which was the first week of April, I managed 3 lots of 9 holes in 16 months, 17 months. And that's how I would describe what 2021 was like for panto producers, that it just consumed you and you didn't think anything could be harder than 2020. But 2021 was bad. It was hard.
So you heard it here first. Basically, Sarah went to play golf and Steve was her caddy. That's the relationship.
That's how it works. But I think that's fine. And, looking ahead to this year...
Hang on, a caddy's supposed to give you advice. He hasn't got a clue, has he?
What's a caddy? Tea caddy. I've got a few of those. I think looking forward, it's really important, and we say this to all the staff, because everybody has come back to work and hasn't had that chance to just take stock of their own lives. And we said it's really important that people take their holiday, that they get a chance to have a breather. Listen, we're all hopeful that pantomime and theatre generally will continue through this year, and that people will come back to the theatre as they are doing and support. But we're also acutely aware that we're now facing a different set of conundrums. Some conundrums this year potentially are going to be harder to deal with than going through the pandemic. And that's why every day is a school day, because you're constantly changing your course, you're constantly reacting to news stories, to things that are going on, things that will directly affect the business, but also the people who work in the business and the people who come to support it.
Well, listen, on behalf of all of the thousands of people who have got great joy from working for you, to the hundreds of thousands of audience members, possibly millions, I would hazard a guess, that have seen your shows over the last 20 years or so, happy anniversary to the two of you, and let's hope for many more years in the future.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you so much.
And that's about it for now. Don't forget to subscribe to the series to catch up with any episodes you've missed, and make sure you don't miss any future episodes. And make sure you join me next time when I'll be talking to associate producer and head of celebrity casting at Imagine, Laura Taylor. I'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.